Hello BookTube! Welcome to Lizzie Faye Loves Books. I'm Elizabeth and this is going to be my Tome wrap-up. Now, if you saw my original June TBR, I nicknamed my TBR for the whole month of June, Giant Book June, because I had read a lot of small books in May, and so I decided that I would not read a book in the month of June that was less than 400 pages. Well, after I had already filmed that video, I discovered that there was a readathon happening for the first 2 full weeks in June called Tome Topple, and it was hosted by Sam from Thoughts on Tomes. Well, I was so excited to hear about this because I love to participate in readathons, and of course that one fit perfectly in with my big book theme for the month. Now, I'm not officially doing the Big Book Challenge, which is a Goodreads group, although when I decided I was going to do this, I looked back through all the books I've read this year, including my audiobooks that are 400 pages or more in print. I had already read, before the month started, I had already read 15 books that were 400 pages or more. So I guess I've really already accomplished the Big Book Challenge if the challenge is to read at least 12 in the year. So that's pretty exciting because I really didn't think that I read a lot of big books. It's probably about 2/3 of those books are audio and about 1/3 are print. But still, I almost surprised myself that I had already read that many just in the year 2016. So now that brings me to June. So I started the month of June wanting to participate at least a little bit in the hop-along that is hosted by Sam from Sam's Nonsense. And so I picked up The Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. This is the very first book of the first series, and I did not get a really quick start. It was during the first day or two of June that I found out about Tome Topple, and the Tome Topple books had to be 500 pages or more. Well, Assassin's Apprentice is only about 435, so it was big enough for my Giant Book June, but not big enough for Tome Topple. And I only got about 52 pages read in the first 4 days of June. So I had to put it down. In fact, I went ahead and sent it back to the library because it just wasn't going to be big enough for Tome Topple. So then, once Tome Topple was over, I picked it back up for TBR Takedown. So I'm not quite done with it at the moment that I'm filming this. I still have about 100 plus pages to go, but I will definitely talk about this more in my wrap-up for TBR Takedown 4.0. So back to Tome Topple. Tome Topple had several challenges, and one of the challenges was to read an adult book. So you couldn't just lean on YA or middle grade books to get you through. You had to actually read an adult book. So I chose The Forgotten Garden by Kate Morton. This was a book that my sister had highly recommended to me, and I had been putting it off for a little while. I think I initially put it off because I thought maybe I would get it on audio, but I don't think our library had it on audio. So then I found this print copy in our library book sale area, and I picked it up a few months ago, and I thought, you know what, I am going to read this one first because my sister has never steered me wrong yet on a book, and I really wanted to read this. This took me about the first 9 days of Tome Topple. It was not a quick read, but it was really, really good. It had more than one setting, and it also had more than one time frame. Part of the book took place in the early 1900s, a little bit of it took place in the 70s, and then a good bit took place in 2005. So the book spans a few generations, and it takes place, the majority of it takes place in Cornwall, England. A little bit of it takes place in Australia. In fact, Kate Morton is an Australian author, and it really has multiple main characters depending on where you are in the time frame, and it bounces back and forth. So you have to pay attention to it, but it's very, very good. There's some intrigue and some mystery. There's there's a little bit of romance. There's genealogy. And it starts out when a little tiny girl, probably 3 or 4, is put on board a ship and told to hide and is left there. So she makes this voyage on ship from London, I believe, to Australia, and gets there and is taken in by the portmaster. He doesn't know who she is or where she's come from or why she's alone, and he takes her in, and then it becomes a mystery to try to figure out who she is, and then we skip to the 70s where she's grown and she's still trying to figure out who she is and solve the mystery of her birth and why she was left on a ship at the age of 3. And so it's just fascinating. I highly recommend this book. It's very, very good. So one of the other challenges in Tome Topple was to take a graphic novel break. But because I'm only allowing myself to read books that are 400 pages or more in the month of June, I couldn't just pick up a small graphic novel. And I had just read Blankets, which is really the only graphic novel that I know anything about that is over 500 pages, so I couldn't read that again. Then I thought about Brian Selznick, and I had never read any of his books, but if you are familiar with them, you know that they are about half pictures and half text. So I picked up The Invention of Hugo Cabret from the library, and I enjoyed it thoroughly. And I didn't read it completely all in one sitting. I read a good bit of it, and then I picked The Forgotten Garden back up, and then I kind of went back to this as I needed it for a break. But then as soon as I finished Forgotten Garden, I did go ahead and finish this before I started my next print book. This was really good. I enjoyed it a lot. It's a story of a boy who lives in a train station, and he was apprenticed to his father or uncle to manage the clocks in the station, but the station people don't know anything about him. His father's killed and his uncle disappears, so he is on his own keeping up with the clocks. And then other things happen and he's not able to do it, and so it just goes on from there. But it has also a lot to do with the early film and movies, and also automatons. So one of the characters in this book is actually based on a real historical figure, and then this fictional story is written around him. So I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I definitely recommend picking it up. Then I was able to almost finish one more print book during Tome Topple, and this one met the challenge to read a book in a series. This is the second book, of course, in A Court of Thorns and Roses series by Sarah J. Maas. This is A Court of Mist and Fury, and I have to tell you, I was a little disappointed in this book, and here's why. It wasn't the story. I really enjoyed the story. Here's what I have a problem with right here. You see where that says teen? That shouldn't be there. And you see, let me show you in here. It's probably too small for you to read here, but the Library of Congress information lists this book as juvenile. Okay? And the publisher is Bloomsbury Children's Books. I wouldn't let a child younger than 18 read this book. As a parent, I would not. I completely disagree that this book should be labeled teen. Maybe if you're 19, and then you still got to be pretty mature. Now I know I'm old school, I'm old fashioned, but this book, set aside the whole story and the fairy tale aspect of it and all, this has a lot of erotica in it, a lot. And the whole book, the undertones are very sexual. Even apart from the actual sex scenes, it's just very sexual. And I don't think that this is what we need to be having in our teen rooms at the library. This is not a children's book. Not in any way, shape, or form. I really want to rant a little bit about the inappropriateness of this book being labeled teen. I'm probably not going to do that in this video. I probably will make that a separate video. But just know that I enjoyed the story, but it was very tainted by the fact that I'm so worried about this sitting in library teen rooms across the country and across the world, where 11 and 12-year-olds will walk in and pick it up and have parents who might think, oh, well, if it's in the teen room, it must be safe, or it wouldn't be in there, and letting their 11 and 12-year-old go in and pick up books that are labeled YA. So I will have more to say about this later because I have very strong feelings about it. But the story was great. I will probably continue the series, but my 12-year-old will not be reading this series anytime soon. Now for my audiobooks for Tome Topple, I do have Gone with the Wind in my car that I am listening to. I did not get very far in it because it's pretty lengthy and I don't spend as much time in my car during the summer as I do during the school year. But I did make a good bit of progress in it, and I will be continuing it on through the month of July and until I finish it. So I had one book that I listened to on audio for book club, and it did not count for anything in Tome Topple, but I needed to get it read because book club happens on the third Thursday of the month. So book club had come and gone before Tome Topple was over, and this book in print is about 403 pages, counting the index. It's a nonfiction book called Boys in the Boat. So of course it was fine for my giant book June, but it didn't count for Tome Topple. But it is called, the subtitle is 9 Americans and Their Epic Quest for Gold at the 1936 Berlin Olympics, and it's by Daniel James Brown, and I really enjoyed this. Now, I'm not a big sports person. I do follow the Olympics a little bit, but I don't really follow much in the way of sports. But I found this book very interesting. I learned a lot about rowing, and then there was also enough about the team members and the coach and the boat maker, and about their relationships and what was going on in their lives to make it very interesting. It was also a very good snapshot of what was going on in the world in the early and mid 1930s. So it was very, very good. I learned a lot from it. I enjoyed reading it, and I would definitely recommend it if you have any interest at all in Olympic biographies and sports type stories. So going back through the challenges real quickly, the first challenge was to read more than one book, which I did. The second challenge was to take a graphic novel break, and I took my graphic novel break with a novel in words and pictures by Brian Selznick. And then the third challenge was to read part of a series, and that was A Court of Mist and Fury. And the fourth challenge, read over 500 pages in 1 week, which I did. And the fifth challenge was to read an adult novel. So The Forgotten Garden was an adult novel. So I met all of the challenges for Tome Topple, and I enjoyed it a lot. I did a few of the Twitter sprints, but I kept missing them. It seemed like almost every time I would get on Twitter, they would have whoever was hosting would have just finished their last sprint, or be, almost done with their last sprint, and then they would sign off, and then there wouldn't be anybody for a while. I still found plenty of time to read on my own, and I just enjoyed it thoroughly. I'm very motivated by readathons, in case you hadn't figured that out by now. So I enjoyed this one a lot. But I'm still continuing my Giant Book June all the way through the end of June. And of course I'm not going to get everything read that I want to in the month of June, and several of the books that I had hoped to get to or that were on my potential TBR, I'm going to go ahead and try to read in the next few months. So stay tuned. But I guess that's all I have for this video. I hope you're having a great day. Read a good book, and God bless you.